We continue learning Halachos Pesach. We're going to conclude baking matzah today, believe it or not. We're going to skip around a little bit over here to try to get to the relevant points. So we spoke yesterday that checking for once the matzahs are baked, if you afterwards check, it's not going to help to get you the mitzvah of ushmartem es hamatzahs. We as well, we'll pick it up from Sif Hey, and very quickly in Sif Hey, the Kovetz Halachos teaches us that the Mechaber writes, afilu rega echad bli esek. Shouldn't leave it for a moment. And the kavanah with this is mamish for rega echad bli esek. Not for a moment. And we already pointed out in the footnote over here, Sivhei, we're finishing up Sivhei. We already pointed out, no, we did this. We did Hey, we did Vav, we did Zayin. No, we didn't. No, whatever. Okay, let's just start from May. We'll do it quickly. But in Tevhei, he teaches us that you shouldn't leave it for a moment. And we point out in the footnote over here that in our matzah bakeries, it's when it's being utilized by the hand. But when you use the metal guy to knead the dough, then it's not in this chamim. Therefore, you have more room to be makel. We pointed out the chazaynish is makel in 18 minutes. But Lamaisa, Hagayin of Shmuel Kamenetsky wanted one to be makel for a daka, l'shtei dakas. That was in Ha'ara Zayin, which is on Sevav, in which he quoted the Machaber that said, for the moment, if you leave it, it's going to be miyad yachmet. So we go into Siv Zayin over here, and he says, Medina in Tzarech lived like matzah shlanu shechutin nimshachem, and you don't have to worry that there might be some chutin nimshachem, and it sounds like in the matzahs that they baked, it was possible that there were some, unbaked parts of it, and we know that our matzahs, our matzahs are as baked and as crispy as anything. Whether, this year they weren't so crispy, they were a little bit too thick, a little bit too chewy, all the tires that everyone has after the Seder. However, Lamaisa, no one ever had a stringy matzah. It's never happened. But yet, in Sivches, he teaches us, but a kfula, which is when the matzah is bent over onto each other. And then the concern is that if you take a piece of dough and you bend it over in between the two folds, you might have a little bit of dough in there that's not fully baked. That he does say one should be chayshish for. It's a little bit confusing in the Mitzias over here in Ha'ara Tes and Ha'ara Yod. Exactly what's going to have a real din of a kfula now, but he says one should be chayshish for it. But he continues in Sif Yod, and he says the utensils that are utilized while baking the matzah that has a kfula, you don't have to have a problem. Meaning it's all chash over here. So one does not have to be worried. But the general minhag is that if it's mamish folded over, you just crack off that piece and you do not eat it. In Sif Yod Aleph over here, he continues the geder of you have to watching the wheat mishas Ktsira. Sif Yud Beis is where we'll continue, because Sif Yud Beis is relevant for us, the consumer. You go to the store, and there's two types of Shmura Matzah. There's Rechaim Shel Yad, it says Rashi, and then there's Rechaim Shel Mechoina, it says Rasham. And you said in the box, and one is $1 billion, and one is $500 million a pound. Obviously, well, matzah is a fortune. One is literally on double. I don't know the prices, but there's Rasham and Rashi. Now, this is not, what? Yeah, it's not like Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. Like, oh no, I could tell the guy in the store, like, no, I don't need the Rabbeinu Tam, just the Rashi. What are you talking about? No, it says in the box Rashi. No. Rashi is Rechaim Shel Yad, and Rasham is Rechaim Shel Mechoina. A Mechoina is a machine, a Yad is a hand. So in Sif Yud Beis teaches us the Kovetz Halachos, Ein Esrichel Nizaher, one does not need to be scrupulous likach to purchase matzos rechaim shel yad. In Ha'arach of Gimel, he comes along, he says, where does all chumrah come from? Rechaim shel yad means it's ground with the hand, or it's actually with your feet. The way they do it is you have those bicycles that everyone, they sit there and it sits there grinding up the wheat. And the question is, where does this come from? So in Sif Katan Gimel, he points out that this chumrah comes from the Shari Tshuva, but Shari Tshuva doesn't say why. You look in the Tashbetz, the Tashbetz brings the Shari Tshuva, and he says, why do you want to use a Rechaim Shel Yad over a Rechaim Shel Mechoina, which in their times was with Mayim, which was a water mill? He says, because there might be a little bit of water that drips into your wheat, and it could be a serious problem. Ulafiza, what's the obvious conclusion? Our Rechaims, there's obviously not even a header, because there's no water dripping off of the machine. into your wheat. He continues and he says that Meir Rabbi Shlita comes in with Shmuel and he says, Adarabba, it's possible that our Rechaim Shel Mechaina is even better. The wheat ground by a machine is even better. Why? He says, it seems like the Mahaja Litzcha Rechaim Shel Yad, he says another reason. Because Rechaim Shel Kitur, Hayasheiloi Shel Zeya, the machines apparently would sweat, Chadaima, and it would create a Chash Chametz. But Bizmanenu, that the Rechaim is made of Chashmal, it's electric. Like a Chash, there's no issue with anything sweating, there's no issue of water. And he says, Adarabba, Rechaim Shel Yad, Bekal Yachol Mayim, Oiroik, Vizeya. You know, if you're sitting there grinding up things with your hands and different body parts, you know, certainly could get sweaty and it could be an issue. Whereas in a factory, it's not a problem. And therefore, Rav Shmuel wants to taina that a Rechaim Shel Mechaina might even be better. He continues in this footnote and he says, 1 second. What about the din of Lishma? So we know, we'll speak about it in a moment, the din of Lishma in the creation of the matzah. But is there a din of Lishma in the Rechaim, in the grinding of the matzah? So says Rav Shmuel, and this is going to be the point that would be debatable. He says you could have Lishma, we know that we paskin, you can have Lishma created by a machine, as Harbi Paiskim, all different Malkiel, Chasar Avram, the Chazinish, Mikoi Kodesh, the Chashleima, which of course is the reason why many are astounded to hear that, like in the firmest places of the world, like Bnei Brak, they don't use hand machine matzah. Because they paskin that the machine, they don't use shmura matzah. They use machine shmura matzah. Why? Because once you paskin that pressing the button is lishma, and it's even more than that. If you ever see the videos, you should look at them. It's very cool. It's not just pressing a button. They have people stationed throughout the whole machine matzah bakery, and they actually push the dough through different parts of the machine to get an extra level of lishma, an extra level of human intervention. But he says over here, Klapi the Rechaim, the grinding is perfectly fine. So Rav Shmuel clearly holds that there's no need to buy Rashi matzahs Rechaim Shel Yad, the Rasham matzahs. It's interesting, it doesn't even sound like he holds there's any level of maila. Let's say someone says, okay, I have extra $20 a pound, doesn't bother me, whatever the number is. Or maybe just for the Leil Seder, we know people have extra chumras. It doesn't sound like Rav Shmuel is moved by the whole thing, and he seems to hold, as he writes, Ein Tzricha Li Zahir. There's no reason to be Zahir. He continues in Sivya Gimel, and he says, Yoitzim b'matzahs afilu ma'iskim ba'matzahs ina shamri Torah mitzvahs. Someone might ask, go to the factory, and who are the people baking the matzahs? Maybe the guy is not the most Yari Shamayim. So are you Yoitzim? And of course, it's a question of Lishma. You need to have a Lishma, L'shem mitzvahs matzah. He says, yes, you're Yoitzim. Al kobanim, you have to stand on top of them, Lishmar, and remind them that it's all done L'shem mitzvahs matzah. Ever go to the factory, do they remind them, yelling, screaming, beating, big signs everywhere. Every time they start the batch, they all proclaim in unison L'shem mitzvahs matzah. Every few minutes, they're banging on the table L'shem mitzvahs matzah. They make sure, if you forget that it's L'shem mitzvahs matzah, you're just pushing, not conscious. I don't even know how you're working in such a place. It's like it's not the shot like you go to the slaughterhouses and the sheikh might be sitting there, with AirPods in and watching a movie as he shechs a chicken. It's not which l'chayra, that's not so gishmak either. But that doesn't happen in the matzah bakeries. They're very much ensure that, at least we hope, that it's l'shem, that it is l'shem mitzvah. In the footnote over here, just interesting, Sevkatin Yedalid, he quotes a Pri Megadim that he says a mummer lahachas la'akum is gara tfei, is even worse than a regular guy. Oisa daitin avshei v'ini yotzi chavas eklal. Umar leti avo in ina lechol mimatzah she'asa shleim b'nei Yisrael. Sarks the hiris yisera mitzvah leitarach. So says Rav Shmuel Mavur al Kapanim Sheim Yisrael Eimer al Gavav, meaning with all the issues the Pri Megadim has, but it's clear that if a Yid is standing al Gavav, then it's kosher. Yidim in Shem Torah mitzvahs Nenu Rubim. He says first of all Kinei Kishenishva, which we all know, and it didn't like Yisrael, famous Chazinish and the Rasham, which they're Mekel Machal Shavs V'Resya. But again, once we have someone being Eimer al Gavav, it's perfectly fine. We conclude this section on baking matzahs. Sif Yudal, it talks about what about matzahs made before 30 days, which are all our matzahs, unless you buy very, very expensive Chodesh Nisan, well, not Chodesh Nisan, but 30 days. Why? The ikar kapeda she'as l'shem mitzvahs matzah. The ikar kapeda is that it should be made l'shem mitzvahs matzah, meaning, as he quotes in Sivkata Tezvav, he quotes sources, Yerushalmi, Seiseftas, saying called a matzah yeshana, like your sukkah. We know if a sukkah is built prior to sukkahs, it could be a problem. It's not built l'shem the sukkah. But he's saying, Kolzman, it's on l'shem mitzvah, it's not a problem. L'shem mitzvahs matzah, matzah mitzvah, kasher gam ma'isa efiyah, koidim sh'l'shem ne'ah Pesach. In Ha'aretz Zayin, he quotes Shmuel, V'amar my Rabbi Sheish Tzadi Sheish Yoser Makom LaHachmir B'Afiyas Matzah Mechayna Koidim Shleishim Yom. Says Shmuel, if you're buying machine matzah, there is a makom to be machmir if it's made before 30 days. Shabazeh Kasha Yoser Likmaya Asiya Lishma. It's harder to make a lishma. Amnalach Lamaisa Gam Efshir Bazeh Ad Kan Take It Farm. So it's interesting. I don't know if that's even a possibility. Meaning, when you buy machine matzahs for Pesach, they use them. I don't know if they even have ones made within 30 days. Maybe this would be a reason for one to be machmir. And that's really the end. Just when it comes to machine matzahs, I think he's going to talk about it later. When it comes to the seder and whatnot, Lamaisa, there are many that, they're makbid on shmura matzahs, everything shmura, excuse me. The makbid on hand matzahs just for the seder, not for the rest of the yontif, which is perfectly fine. But if you want another reason to be makbid, or Shmuel just gave it to us, because all of our hand matzahs, all of our machine matzahs are baked well in advance of Pesach. Hopefully it's from this year Pesach. And then therefore, it's harder to have lishma if it's made more than 30 days before. And nimnu v'gamru, halachas of baking matzahs, and v'siyata shmaya will move weiter.